Well, good day to you. It is October the 13th, 2024, and I hope you're having a great day wherever you are. My name is Gary Willing. I want to welcome everyone to Search for Signs. And for those people who are new, who might want to know more about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, may I recommend something before I start this video, and that is to do some research for yourself, okay? If you look in the description portion of every one of these videos, there are links that take you to websites that talk about this information in some way. Now, the two at the very top, the Share International site, and then there's a YouTube channel that will take that YouTube channel has a video. It's about an hour long of Benjamin Creme talking about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom and why they're here. So you have a couple choices. I would say would be the best to start off with: the Share International site or that video, and then you can really have the best sense of whether this is true for you or not in that way. So hopefully you'll take advantage of it. None of those links you have to pay for. It just costs you just a little bit of time to do your own research to see if there's any truth to this information. So hopefully at some point you'll do it. Now, you want to come back and join the discussion. You are, of course, welcome to do that. You can let me know what you think by posting a comment. You can ask a question by posting your question in the comment section, or you can email me that question to searchforsigns@mail.com, and then I'll do my best to try and answer that question. Now, it's not going to necessarily be the best answer to the question that you could get. I'm not saying I'm the only one that can answer those questions or even the best person to answer that question, but I will at least give it a good college try. So this is an example of me trying to answer somebody's question and they didn't think it was the best answer. And James, if you don't mind, I'm going to read a bit of your email that's about the comment, and then I'll try to answer the next question. So at least you trust me enough to ask me another question. You might not like the answer to that either, and that might be the last time you ever try to ask me a question, but because then that will be 2 strikes. So anyway, dear Gary, I like you. Thank you for telling people about Maitreya. I believe in the things he believes in: food, housing, education, healthcare are human rights. It's a tragedy this blankety-blank country doesn't believe that. I have to respond to your last show. Does God interact with you? No, of course not. That's the bottom line, Gary. He doesn't interact with any of us. It's not about perception as you claim. It's about the truth. The truth is God hides and he doesn't interact with us, which tells me he doesn't care. That's the truth. If he did care, he would show himself. All right, and there's other parts to your comment, but that's the main part that I wanted to talk about. So, if you don't mind, James, real quick, I just want to read the first part of this. I believe in the things he believes in: food, housing, education, and healthcare are human rights. And how do I say this? That's the reason why I do believe that people will change. The world's going to change because you're not alone. People believe in that, right? They want those things. But if I may be slightly specific, perhaps splitting a hair, but I am trying to bring a distinction into this that I don't know if you think about when you talk about this, but Maitreya does not believe in those things. He does not believe that humanity needs food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, and education as a right. Now, I don't speak for Maitreya, but I know this to be true, I guess, is it's not about belief for him. Those things are what really are needed to bring about justice. That's the reality of the situation. Here in this, what you call a shitty country, the United States, which I don't think it's a shitty country. I do think it's got its issues, right? I don't agree with everybody in the United States. I think we're taking some steps back, for sure. But it's a lovely country, and the people here are great. But like I said, we got some growing up to do. But here in the United States, if you ask people what justice is, they would not really answer it the way that Maitreya is saying justice is, which is where everybody, without exception, has as a right food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, and some kind of education. As a right. Doesn't matter where you live, what age you are, how much money you have, what God you worship. You have those as a right. That is justice. He doesn't need to believe in it. It's not a belief, okay? And please don't take it the wrong way, and you don't have to write me an email about how I didn't understand what you were saying. I'm just trying to clarify this because it's not about belief. It's about what is needed to bring about justice. Now, Maitreya's plan to bring about justice, 99.9% of the people out there have no idea what that is or how to bring about justice. If you ask somebody here in the United States what justice is, most of the time it's going to have something to do with legality, right? Somebody harms you, you have the right to be able to sue them, or the courts go after them criminally or something like that. That's justice. There's a crime, somebody pays for that crime. That is justice. Or if you talk to a minority group, equality would be justice, right? But even then, racial equality is not true justice that will bring about peace. It's not enough. It's not, and so people in this country are fighting for racial justice, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a divine purpose, but it's not going to bring about peace. And even then, they still don't know how to do it. They don't know what's going to bring it about. They just know that they want that. And so they go and they march, protest, or whatever against injustice, for racial justice, but they don't know what to do. They don't know how to get there. And that's where Maitreya's information is going to, I think, shed light on it for people. He'll be able to explain it a lot better than I can, but sharing alone will bring about justice. Will bring about a state in the world where every single person has what you want, what you believe in. Food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, and education as a right. That's the only way to do it. So we could believe in it, we could want it, but until we do something about it, it's not going to happen. The action is the principle of sharing. That will bring about that state where we have a just state, where there is justice out there. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody has the same home, the same clothes, the same kind of food, because we all have different needs. And it doesn't mean that everybody's house is going to be this glorious mansion like Jeff Bezos they have 15 different homes in different parts of the world, and that's true justice, because that's not it either. They can still have those really, really nice homes on the beach, but yet other people who need a home could still have a home. It doesn't mean that you get to go eat every night at Le Cirque, in New York or something like that. But yet it does mean that you have some kind of food to eat. And everybody's dietary, needs are different than others. So it would depend on where you live and all that kind of stuff. But everybody should have that as a right. And like I said, it doesn't mean that everybody's going to make the same amount of money. So it's not communism. A lot of times people will throw that back. Well, this sounds like communism. It's not communism. Communism is a belief. It's an ideal. Just as capitalism is a belief and an ideal. Just as socialism is a belief and it's an ideal. The principle of sharing is beyond that. True justice is beyond belief. It's divine. It's a divine state, needing the principle of sharing in order to bring it about. Maitreya says, without sharing, there will be no justice. Without justice, there will be no peace. And without peace, there will be no future. Because at some point, if we don't bring about peace, we will destroy ourselves, either nuclearly or through the environment in action. And the only way that we will solve the environmental problem is if nations learn to trust one another and work together with one another. Real quick, if you do not understand what the principle of sharing is or the ability for it to bring about peace, if you look at what happened right after World War II, the United States created this plan called the Marshall Plan. It was named after George Marshall, who was one of the people who devised the plan. He was the Secretary of State at the time, under Truman, the President Truman. And it was a very, very basic form of the principle of sharing. It happened in between just a few countries, not for the whole world, but just a few countries. And it happened for just a limited amount of time. But the United States gave excesses of their resources to Western Europe. Western Europe rebuilt itself, gave the excesses back to the United States in payment. That was the principle of sharing. Now, the historical, evidence that the principle of sharing will bring about peace, justice, and bring about peace, is that those nations that were once at war with one another, none of them attacked each other. those peoples can travel easier to those nations than they can between any other nation on the planet. Those people trust one another. The governments of those nations trust the other governments of those nations better than they do the other nations. It doesn't mean that it's perfect. It just means that they have a better trust amongst each other. Those nations that participated in the Marshall Plan trust one another better than they do the other nations. I kind of got tongue twisted on that, but that's what I mean. And you can go and you can look at it. There's a link in the description of talking about the Marshall Plan. There's a link to the Wikipedia page talking about the Marshall Plan. They don't look at it from that standpoint, the way that I'm talking about it, bringing about goodwill and bringing about peace. But if you look at it historically, you can see where it did bring about goodwill. And from the Master's point of view, goodwill is not only the lowest aspect of peace, it's the lowest aspect of love. So it brought about manifested love. Now, if doing the principle of sharing 70 some odd years ago for 4 years created peace even to today amongst those nations. It's not, like I said, it's not a perfect peace, but it is the lowest level of peace, lowest level of love. What would have happened if the United States had decided to do it with every nation on the planet and it never ended? What kind of world would we be living in today? Would we have had 9/11? Would we have had this war on terror? Would we have had all the hunger in the world? Would we have had the political divisions, the economic divisions? Or would we be living in a totally peaceful world? All the presidents that talk about military strength being key to peace and security are lying not only to themselves, but they're lying to their people, because it's never brought about peace. It's only brought about more instability. It's very expensive to maintain, and it's not securing anything. But what happened in the late 1940s, early 50s with the Marshall Plan did bring about a measure of peace. If we could just try it worldwide, it would bring about the peace and security that these world leaders are talking about. It would end illegal immigration, because the people that are coming into these developed countries from the underdeveloped countries are only doing it because they need a way to live. They need a life, the life that they're not getting in their nation, in their country. So they come across the border illegally to try to make money for their family, to survive, to live. If they didn't have to do that, they wouldn't travel illegally to another country. They would be able to just stay in their own country and do it. So it would solve that problem too, which is a big political discussion every election year in the United States. But anyway, now to get to the whole issue about God revealing himself, I don't really know how to answer it other than you think God is separate from you. It must be coming from your background, James, right? Maybe, but that's what you believe, I'm assuming, right? I have a different view on it. And I'll tell you a funny little note. Benjamin Creme, when he was working with his master, he would ask his master, there was a time when he started asking his master questions. Am I correct on this? And his master said, that's it exactly. And then he asked him another question, and Ben's master answered it the same way. That is it exactly. And then he asked him another question not too long after that. And his master said, that is it exactly. And then he started to wonder why he kept saying the same thing and answering his question in the same way, saying that's it exactly. Once he had that thought that maybe his master was trying to teach him something, his master finished the phrase. That's only half of it. That's it exactly. But what he was saying was, that is it exactly as you see it. And belief is the same way. Our view of God is the exact same way. It's how you see it. If you see yourself as separate from God, there's nothing I can do. I can't tell you anything about it. You're going to believe what you believe. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that's what you're seeing. And I'm not even saying that my view of God is right. I'm just saying that I see it differently than that. Maitreya said once, as man so relates to man, does man relate to God. Now, what does that mean? I take that to mean, if you're a critical person, your God is going to be critical. If you're dogmatic, bigoted, perhaps a tad bit on the angry side. Your God is going to be bigoted, dogmatic, and a tad bit on the angry side. If you're a laid-back person, your God's going to be laid back. If you're accepting and tolerant of different views and different religions and different sexual orientations, perhaps, your God is going to be lenient and tolerant of those things too. It's a universal. There isn't anybody that is perhaps critical and bigoted and closed-minded and dogmatic about their own view. And their God is, to them, they're worshiping a God that's loving and open-minded. Even, and it goes to, a lot of the hardcore Christians claim they say that Jesus is the perfect example of love, right? Divine love. Loves everybody. But yet, if you don't believe what you believe, that same loving God is going to send you to hell. You better believe what they believe, right? You better come on their side and join their team, or that God that's so loving and understanding isn't going to love you. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. That's where all the confusion comes into play. If you view yourself as being separate from God, well, then God's not going to reveal himself to you, right? You're alone in the woods, right? You're in this jungle by yourself wondering, why is God not revealing himself? Now, if you see everything is God, then God's revealing himself to you moment to moment every single day. There is nothing but God. And that's where I think the whole talk about the principle of sharing, why it's so important, why this is Maitreya's biggest priority, the principle of sharing. If it is true what he says, as man so relates to man, as man so relates to man, does man relate to God, then the principle of sharing has to take place in the world. Because then we would be seeing each other as one, which is how we really are, which is how God really is. That's where it's so important. That's why it has nothing to do with belief, James. Nothing to do with belief. It has to do with, and that's why justice has nothing to do with belief. These are divine qualities. Because there is nothing but divinity. When you see yourself as separate from God, that creates all sorts of problems, because you see God away from you, right? And in some instances, such as yourself, you're kind of bitter about that. Other instances, you feel like you can do whatever you want with impunity because God can't really see you because he's kind of away from you. Therefore, you can, I'm not saying you personally, but people do probably think this on some level. Well, if God's over there, I can do this over here and no problem. I always wonder why the mafioso guys, they all have crucifix, they all wear crucifix, but yet they're just brutal, brutal people. And yet they go to church and they pray and it's like nothing ever happened. You know what I'm saying? Because they don't think Jesus is around. You know what I mean? So Jesus, they can do whatever they want, right? And then as long as they pray to God or ask for forgiveness or go to the priest and ask for forgiveness, well, then everything's cool. Well, in actuality, we're all one thing. So if you're harming somebody else, you're actually harming yourself. Then that adds a whole other dynamic to life. You know what I mean? But I do think it does have to do with perception. If how you perceive yourself, how you perceive life is how you perceive God. And that's where our truths come from. But our truths aren't really truths. They're beliefs. And what you said about, how did you put it? I want to read it exactly. You said, does God interact with you? No, of course not. That's the bottom line. He doesn't interact with any of us. It's not about perception as you claim. It's about the truth. The truth is God hides and does not interact with us, which means he doesn't care. Is that a truth? Is that the reality of the situation? How can it be the reality of the situation? Because I don't see life like that. I don't see God like that. So I'm not bitter that this person's not manifesting in my living room saying he's God and telling me all the secrets of the universe, because I don't see life like that. But yet I can see God in nature. Jesus talked about that too. Maitreya says when you share, with your brother, you're actually sharing, how do you put it? You're acknowledging God within your brother when you share. So that is God interacting. So for instance, if somebody was starving to death and you came by and you gave them food, you might not see yourself as God, but to them, you are God giving them food. You are God interacting with them. That's how they would perceive that, especially if they were about to die from that. So you can interact with somebody by serving with them, and to them, that is God interacting with them. But when you feel totally isolated, as you seem to be, well, then you're expecting something to happen, and it's not going to happen that way. And then you get bitter about it, as far as I'm concerned. So, hopefully it answers your question, or not really answer your question, but addresses that. But I'm sorry that you feel that way. There's nothing I can say to get you to see it another way, but I don't see life like that. And then when it comes to perception, I would just say this too. We all see things differently. And I kind of put it like this: if you had a hungry tiger in a cage, and you're standing in the cage with that tiger is not going to see you as a person with a life, with a purpose. They're only going to see, and their only purpose is to eat you because they're hungry. But a person might see you and see another person and not see you as lunch, but you're the same person, right? If Jesus were looking at you, he would not be looking at you as food, right? He'd be looking at you as perhaps divine, just as he is divine. And it is all based on perception. You're all looking at the exact same thing, seeing something totally different. You see life as separate. It's causing you pain and suffering. I don't see it that way. I see us as one. I see that the principle of sharing will bring about that oneness, in a reality, in real form, and not just talking about it. But anyway, all right, now what's your question? You were asking a question about wasting a lifetime. Gary, I don't mean to grill you. You're a good guy. My mom thinks I am the cutest, smartest, and most capable person out there, for sure. Just ask her. She'll tell you. I'm kidding. I just have to respond to the things you say on your show. On one of your shows, you said, in certain of our lives, we waste them. Creme said this too. This is quite a damning thing to say, showing how self-righteous and judgmental Mr. Creme was. He wasn't self-righteous and judgmental. I have to say, when I first met him, and for years, I thought that same thing. And he was tough on me. He was not easy on me at all. And I tried to open the door sometimes to him, and I felt like he closed the door on me all the time, right? But looking back on it, what he was saying to me, I needed. I would not be the same. I would not be where I'm at today. I would not be able to talk about this information the way that I do on the YouTube channel, for sure. And this is just one example of it, without Benjamin Creme saying the things that he said to me earlier on that hurt my feelings. And so I don't think he was judgmental and self-righteous, although I can see why you say that. You know what I'm saying? Because I thought that too. But it took me years of really working through it and really being honest with myself and how I interacted with him to look at, he was just teaching me what I needed to learn. And he taught everybody differently. He didn't teach everybody the same way. So I'm glad he did what he did. But it was tough love for me, no matter, as one would say. Now, to waste a life is, from the master's point of view, is a life where you do not make any advancement toward becoming a master. So we all started out individualizing 18.5 million years ago, according to the Ageless Wisdom Teachings. 18.5 million years ago, we started to incarnate out of the animal kingdom. And from that moment on, each one of us have been making progress, either fast or slow, into becoming a master. they call it the path. So if you looked at it as a path symbolically, we're all walking the same path. Maitreya walked it faster than others because he, if you looked at it as a day, every day he made progress. Every lifetime he made just a little bit of progress. And so he was able to move much faster. I don't know if he's the only one that's never wasted a lifetime. Ben never was asked that question. But Maitreya did. And he said, for the most part, we all waste lifetimes, at least one. And Ben had even said, talk about being self-righteous. Ben said that in his lifetime before, I would say his previous lifetime, but he's out of incarnation now. So his previous lifetime was when he was Ben. But the lifetime before that, he said that he wasted his entire lifetime. And one of the other masters, the master Tlacote, who worked with Alice Bailey and got his information out through the Alice Bailey teachings, he was extremely devoted to his master, the Master Kuthumi, and he talked about wasting several lifetimes with that devotion. And so even he wasted lifetimes. But apparently Maitreya had never wasted a lifetime. But the way I remember Ben explaining in his book, it's just a lifetime where you make no progress. Perhaps I know for Ben, I think he said his family was quite wealthy in his previous life, in his lifetime before Ben. Before he was Ben, he was quite wealthy and basically was just partying the whole time and didn't move in any, in any way, shape, or form, take a step forward in any way. And he sure made up for it in his last life as Ben, that's for sure. But does that make sense? The surest way to progress is to serve. When you're serving, you are decentralizing yourself, and that's what the masters are. They're totally decentralized. They don't see themselves as individuals the way that most people see themselves as individuals. They see themselves in the world and the world in them. Therefore, there's no reason for God to reveal themselves. They're just seeing everything as it is right then. And so when they serve, they're really not serving other people, they're serving themselves. One of the masters said there are no other people to serve. It's them. They are you. Now, if you were to talk to somebody like Krishnamurti, he would say that, I think, based on what I've understood from him, I'm just paraphrasing what I think he would say, it's about the inwards part of your life and I think it takes both. I think it takes service and in some way, shape, or form, whether that's teaching someone or art or whatever. But it also takes the inner part too. You have to, he looked at himself. He always said to be very diligent about your thoughts, your motives, your emotions, and those kind of things, and learn to detach from those things. Maitreya's teachings, he says, honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment. And that's what Krishnamurti is talking about in his own way. He doesn't necessarily use that terminology, but that's what he's talking about, how to do. And when you do that, you progress. But if you're not introspective at all, you're not doing any of the inner work, you're not doing any of the outer work, then you're not making any progress. And if you go a whole lifetime without doing that, well, then you've wasted that life. And then you got to come back and do it again, right? And the two great laws, according to the Ageless Wisdom Teachings, the first one is the law of cause and effect. Jesus talked about it. What you sow shall you reap. In the East, they call it the law of karma, right? Most people don't really understand karma, the law of cause and effect. This is why we have the lives that we have. Maitreya will be teaching humanity on a global scale that universal law in greater detail, probably starting off kind of simply how Jesus, kind of picking up where Jesus left off with what you sow shall you reap, but he'll be talking more and more and more about it to where it's central to everybody's life, that law, where we start to learn to live within that law, live harmlessly within that law, because that forms the next lifetime. So what we do in this lifetime creates problems or benefits for us in this lifetime, but it also creates problems or benefits in the next lifetime, especially problems. So if you're harming people in this lifetime, it might take you a few lifetimes to work all that out, right? So that could be another way of looking at a wasted lifetime, because you have to burn off all the karma that you created in the previous lifetime. I don't know. So that's another way of looking at it too. And then the other law would be the law of reincarnation, which what we're talking about. But just because somebody goes into this life, somebody that you might see that doesn't really, they don't really, they just, how do I say this? I would say probably a really clear indication of somebody that's truly wasting a life is somebody that just assumes that everything that they believe is true and don't really look at and question what they believe, right? To get back to belief. They just assume what they assume. They get up every day, they do their job, they do their life or whatever. If they're retired, they just do this. They have the same people in their life that agree with them. They don't really push themselves on any level. They don't have any kind of friction or fire to get them moving in any direction. They're just kind of living their life out. Perhaps is wasting a life. I don't know. Now, it's also been said that Maitreya, even though he didn't waste a life, he lived every aspect of human life. So anything that you see or you could think of possibly happening to yourself or has happened to you or you see in other people or see in the news or whatever like that, tragic, whether it's tragic or something that you might even admire. He's lived that at some point when he was coming up through the ranks. He lived that in a way. So thus is he truly the Son of Man, as Ben's master said. Hopefully that answers your question. I tried to answer it as best I possibly could, James. But anyway, I thank you very much for the questions and the comments, James. And you don't have to you don't have to apologize for grilling me. I actually kind of like it. It gets me thinking. When I have tough questions that come my way, it gets me thinking about myself, about how I'm presenting my answer and those kind of things. I love it. So you don't have to apologize for it, James. Love you guys. Thank you very much. You guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you in future videos.